exciting. So now we are officially live. We'll wait a couple of seconds as usual. This is driving me bananas. I don't like the mirroring thing. I really didn't know. I always wondered, why do I look strange back to front on here? But now I get it. We will, let's see if anybody says hi. Okay, something made a noise. So I need to turn off anything that can make an alert noise. I got the message from YouTube to say we are live. So we are definitely streaming on YouTube. And then everyone can come and say hi if anyone chooses to join. And I'm really excited because I think there's so much amazing. There's so much, like, you're doing so many amazing things that this is just really exciting for me. And I've been dying. Well, we've been dying to do this particular live for ages.
Now.
This is actually like I think it's almost a 3-month conversation.
Exactly. No, we've definitely been trying to discuss, but finally, stars ends up aligning, and we managed to have this conversation.
Today is our lucky day. We've managed to pull it off today. Hi, Tamisha. Thank you so much for joining us. And you know what? I think the other part as well is that it's so critical, the work that you're doing, that for me it's just exciting to hear how the world is moving and what's happening outside of the traditional gaze, because I think we don't always look, everybody looks at Africa, I think sometimes with two gazes, but I'll talk about that in a second, and I'll let you do your intro too. I can't see, this is the only problem, they've changed it now, and because we're streaming to 2 places, I can't see who's here or not. So like I know Tamisha's here because she said hi, but we can't see it. So I'm just going to leave the banner up so that people still aren't scared to say hi anyway. So in case anybody doesn't know me, I'm Leanne Meyer, the founder and managing director of Benefactum Consulting. And I'm really, really happy and honored to have Melanie Keita here with me today, because we are talking about building. I know I always get it wrong, so you're going to say it better than I am. Hi Adjua, hi Mame. But this is something that's super important for everybody, really. And as I was saying before, we tend to view the continent of Africa through 2 lenses. One is either like abject poverty, or the other one is super, super rich people. But we don't normalize the continent. We don't normalize innovation. I don't even think we have a full grasp as to how much is going on the continent. I think we're missing so much. And the fact that you're actively doing that, Melanie, and you're kind of going in and you're building infrastructures and you're really supporting the continent in a way that's so forward looking, it just makes me super excited to talk about it. So if you want to give yourself a little introduction, not least, I love the name of your company, but I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Leanne, and thank you so much for having me. I'm very, very excited to finally get to discuss with you about those topics. I'm Melanie Keita, as you said. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Melanin Kapital. And my background and my story starts in a small village in France, in west of France. I grew up, I have African origins, but I grew up fully in Europe. And I grew up with really the motivation and the will to get closer to all my family that was based in Congo, Mali, and Senegal. And basically with the idea of building bridges between my 2 homes, because I've never felt that I was from one home only. For me, I'm from 2 homes. And it's been very challenging, I think, for a lot of Africans from the diaspora to find a way to reconnect with their second home and find a way to contribute to see the continent's progress, because of course there's a lot that has happened since the first times that we were featuring Africa as the poor continent, as you said very, very rightly. But we still think that we have a responsibility, like a lot of the diasporans think that we can actually engage and make a difference on the ground by either supporting with investment, supporting with time and mentorship. There's definitely ways to do something. So that's how myself and my co-founder decided to build Melanin Capital, and to think that, okay, we are here in Europe at the moment, but at some point we would like to go to the continent and settle, and we would like to contribute to seeing things change for our communities and our families back home. And how can we actually make a difference being so far? And this is how we came up with the idea of building a technology platform that can actually provide the capacity building and investment towards companies that are making a difference. So really specifically impact-driven companies. So we say that we believe in impact-driven startups to build today the Africa we want tomorrow, one entrepreneur at a time. So that's our motto, and that's why we are working days, nights, and beyond to be able to achieve this in collaboration with the amazing people that we find in our ways, and amazing partners that also share our passion, let's say.
Right. And I think, I mean, I'm gonna go. There's so much to go back to, but the first thing I want to start on with, because I do believe strongly in the power of a name in general. And one of the things that I love when I first came across your profile was that it's called Melanin Capital. I mean, there is no doubt as to what is going on, and I think that's something really important that you said about kind of addressing. And I spoke about this recently about identity and the fact that, like, once upon a time, I'd focused so much on being British that I left the Jamaican element out. And it's like, actually, I'm British Jamaican, and I embrace both of those parts of me. That is who I am. And you sit in your own culture as much as you sit in both. And I think I like the fact that you're bridging that gap to say, well, you know, I'm paying reference to where I've grown up and that part of my culture, but also very important is, where do my forefathers come from? How do I connect into this? And how can I make sure, and this is for me the most important part, is with your forward-looking view, how can you make sure that you move to a country and you've put something into the system to ensure that the country is better, that you're not just taking out resource, but you're also putting something back in. And I like that it's the whole, the whole view, the whole ecosystem, not just, hey, I want to do this because, but it's, I want to provide support, provide connections, bridge a gap, but also make sure I'm putting in.
Exactly, yeah, because also like, like we are a lot of actually very motivated people to try to make a difference for the African continent. You have like diaspora organizations that are doing something. You have incubators on the ground. You have some investors. You have public institutions. But also as a citizen, it's difficult to get involved because not everything is very easy to grasp or very easy to be involved in. So that's why we wanted to have also this kind of infrastructure, as you said nicely, like this digital infrastructure that can unite actually like everyone and all the actors that are actually having the same vision. Because if we do things individually, there's less chances for us to achieve what we want to do. But if we unite and if we do one front to be able to support the African continent, not only Western countries or even Asian countries that are trying to pool money into this, but also the whole ecosystem, and especially, and I think in particular, African peoples themselves that can then get involved into building the continent that they want to see. I think that's what we wanted to also bring into that ecosystem. It's also the voice of those that haven't been able to speak up so far.
Right. And that's a critical part. I mean, recently I was talking to Glory from Reti, and that was the other part about it. It's like not going in and throwing your money at people and expecting them to follow the laws of your corporate land, but actually allowing allowing people to succeed on their own terms, but you're just providing them with the capital and the possibilities. And I mean, for me, what's also of huge relevance is the fact that, the data always shows that it's easier to be a Western person, a non-Black person, to get funding to invest in Africa, rather than somebody who is based on a Black person based on the African continent to get that same investment. And I think that's what I love, that is really pushing the boundaries, is that you're saying we are going to support those who usually by Western standards don't meet the criteria, because they're like, no, but you're giving them the opportunity to succeed on their terms, respecting local laws, local cultures. Because I think whilst local laws may be respected by loads of people, local cultures may not be, in terms of how the company's structured, in terms of how people are related to all this kind of stuff. And that you're doing it that way, for me, is so much more harmonious in terms of being able to build a solid, successful infrastructure, because you're not looking to deposit your ideas, you're helping them uplift their ideas. And I think that for me is a really different mentality and a different approach.
Yes, thank you for that. And I think that the mentalities and the mindsets are evolving that way, because there's more and more demands also from, African entrepreneurs themselves to be taken differently, let's say. And we need, of course, as many actors as possible to come into building the African continent. We've seen amazing changes now with a lot of unicorns that are popping from the startup world in Nigeria, now in Kenya, even in Senegal lately. And that's very promising, because we're seeing that, yes, the innovations, African innovations solving African problems are being seen, being recognized, and being rewarded for that. And we're going towards that direction. And that's why I think that more and more in the impact investment space on the continent, there is more local investors being promoted, more women being promoted, to just try to reduce those investment biases that you were talking about, and that manage to, let's say, support a share of the entrepreneurial populations in the continent. But now we need to have a bit more in the ecosystem to be able to really support local entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs that are also solving critical challenges on the continent. So that's also what we're trying to build. Like, our vision, even with Melanin Kapital, would be to really include everyone from each country. So we don't want to come with our venture building programs or with our platform like in any African countries. Well, now we started with Kenya because my co-founder is Kenyan. We met in Kenya and we understand very well the market. But how about when we go to Sudan, for example, when we go to Chad, to Ivory Coast? Like, we need to also work with local partners to really make sure that we provide a solution to local problems, and not just with the vision that we may have from our experiences from other environments. And that's the whole. I think that everyone is also trying to evolve towards that kind of mindset, and to really collaborate and inspire collaborations with people locally to adapt their products and services to the markets.
Yep. And I think that's a really relevant point. It's solving local problems with local solutions, because I think, we've been taught, and people are kind of getting it slowly, but still, I always think about global companies a lot of times, and I've experienced this myself. You work for a global company, but it's still, the company believes their culture comes ahead of the local culture. And that ultimately means that you miss a trick, because if you're prioritizing your company's culture over the local culture, you're not listening to the tone, you're not hearing what's fully going on. And as you rightly said, and I think this is another, as much as people understand that Africa is a continent, I think they don't get Africa as a continent at the same time. It's like, it's a continent there are loads of different countries. And I think that's a real key point, is that you can't assume that if you're in West Africa, you can take the same approach, not just in East Africa, but in the neighboring country. It's really, as you said, partnering locally to make sure that you're looking at things in a way that's not just how you see it. And I love that part about sometimes we're taught through the Western European lens, we're taught to measure things, define things, whether it's success, value, connections, network. We're taught to value it in one particular way, but actually other countries have completely different value sets, and that's something that we can't put aside. Even if our goal, it's like you said, you have to look at it through the local lens to make sure that your company's goals are also aligned to that, because ultimately, if you're looking to help people here, your goals have to align with what they need, not what we've been taught, not what we believe value is or what success is. And that's hard.
Okay. It is. And I think that, for me, the country that always amazed me on that is Kenya, because Kenya, to really, really excel in that market, you need to have a Kenyan solution to a Kenyan problem. You cannot just copy paste and not take into account the whole cultures and value system and habits of the communities on the ground. And that's how everyone talks about M-Pesa, for example. M-Pesa being this mobile money transfer kind of innovation that was developed by Safaricom, and M-Pesa was so well designed for the Kenyan market, and it's been widely adopted. It was a huge success, and I just loved that's also how I felt completely in love also with this country, because they were pioneer into showing that the financial system in Africa doesn't work. Like in Kenya, was not working for everybody. So they chose to find a way to leverage on the technology that nobody saw coming at that time, on mobile technology, to then be able to enhance financial inclusion. That you could pay with a Nokia phone anywhere in Kenya, and that was really a huge revelation at the time. And to be fair, this model has been replicated somewhere else. Like even I'm thinking about French-speaking Africa, and it didn't work as well as it works in Kenya. And it's just because they managed to really provide such a product that was so adapted to the country and so adapted to the communities, that was a huge success. And I think that's when we do business in Africa, and that's a preoccupation we always should have in mind.
Yeah. So how has this, let's say, working more within the African continent, how has that affected you? What has it shown you that you didn't necessarily expect or see as you were growing up? What's the difference for you?
It's a good question. You see, for me, I was so sure I would not work in Europe. I don't know, since I'm a child, I was so sure, because of also the whole way I grew up in a village where we were the only Black family. So I've never felt like I belonged so much. So I was really sure I would work in Africa. The only people that were not sure were my parents, and they were telling me the differences that I would have to face. But I was really ready. So for me, I was not. I would say I was not surprised. And every day when I work with other African entrepreneurs and in the African environment, I'm just every day more motivated, because I see that the beauty also of working there is that you always have concrete problems that you're solving every day, and those problems that you're solving with the business are really making a difference, and that really keeps you going, because you don't feel that you're just selling for selling. You're really selling to also make a difference, and you're producing to make a difference. And you feel that you're part somehow also of the building history of the collective building history of the continent. And that's why I'm so every day inspired to work with the suppliers, entrepreneurs, investors that we meet every day during our business, because they all are motivated by that mindset, and that's really pleasant to go with on an everyday basis.
No, I like that. I like that. The fact that you're seeing, because sometimes I think when I think about our approach, or in general, I think because of the way Europe is built infrastructurally, even now as we're talking, like with my work, with focusing on gender equality and also looking at it through the lens of being a Black woman, there's so much about it that there isn't, in that sense, instant gratification in many senses, because there are still, it's a real problem, but people still don't understand or see the problem as a real problem. They see it as still very much intangible, solved in many cases by more bodies, but not solved by larger systemic changes. And I think there must be something so refreshing about being able to see the impact of the changes, being able to see, this is the problem, this is how we solve the problem. The question is, what do we need? Who do we need? How much funding do we need to be able to solve this? It almost feels in many cases like mathematics. I'm not good at maths, by the way, if anyone wants to know. It just feels like, you're building parts of the equation, but everybody gets that there's a problem. Like, everybody gets that this is the problem. The question of how to solve it might be up for debate. What's quicker, what's longer, what's more expensive, what's more effective, what's more efficient, et cetera, but everybody agrees on the one part of this is the problem. When you move into like gender equality and racial equity, there is no fixed problem, because people still debate the problem. And I think that's some part of the issue. People are still debating the problem. And I hope that one day I get to that stage where you are, where you're like, the problem is no longer the debate. The question is, how do we fix this? What do we need? Because I know, like, in my case, the gratification will always be delayed, but when you get there, it's definitely satisfying. But it would be nice to be in a situation where people agree that this is the problem. That's it, and for it to not be debated.
That's funny that you say that, because I can't believe it's, for me, it's like when I don't know if you've seen this episode of Trevor Noah where Greta Thunberg is coming and she says that it's funny, every time I come to your country, climate change is a problem we have to debate about, and in my country this is a reality. Like, it's just a fact. And it's, for me, racial equality and gender inequality, for me, it's a fact. I mean, it's in the figures. I can't believe this is still something that we're still debating. That's horrible that you still have to justify, because it definitely delays a bit the work.
Right. It's sure, because the question is, you spend more time, talking about what is the problem. Are you sure that's the problem, as opposed to how do we solve the problem? And I think that's also going to be, in many cases, a theme going forward, because as soon as we reach a certain level of progress and we encounter new problems, depending on how profitable they are to keep things, depending on how profitable it is to keep things as they are, depends on how much people are willing to actually solve the problem. And I think that's also the reality. And I think what you're doing, obviously you're solving local problems with local solutions, but underneath all of that, you're empowering people. You're empowering people to be able to be in a position, and I call this the circle of money, but you're putting them in a good part to start to build, to start this circle of money, to be able to earn, to be able to save, at some point eventually to be able to invest, to be able to build generational wealth. And this is what I love about what you're doing, because if you were just to look at it on the surface, okay, there's a problem, you're solving it, but it's much more than that. It's creating an economy. It's creating possibilities, whether it's microfinancing, whatever it is, you're creating possibilities for people to change the path of their families' futures going forward. And I think that's the part of seeing, the Africa you want of tomorrow, is possibilities. and not possibilities created by you defining what their success should look like, but rather they're defining what their success should look like. You're just helping them to make it possible. And I love that. I think that is really powerful. Really, really powerful.
Thank you so much. And I love the way you put it, because that's definitely what we want, is just also create like this hope and showing that it's possible for everyone to be able to get to the level where you get to this completely financial independence, because you have a business that you're growing, and we support you to get to the level where you can be eligible for funding to grow more and scale up and get to the point where, as you said, you can then save and then invest. That's definitely it. And what we've developed in short is really like a pathway to finance, to really include more and more entrepreneurs into the financial system. Today, the problem is that a lot of small entrepreneurs are not getting access to credit or to capital because they don't meet the standards of a lot of founders that are present in the continent. They don't have necessarily the track record, they don't have the documentation, they don't have the collateral, so they don't tick the boxes that basically would get them access to funding. So what we try to do digitally is really to build that track record, help them to strengthen their businesses internally, help them to be certified or like verified, have this kind of stamp that's unlike it's not yet an audit, but it's something that would look like an audit, at least that would be adapted for them. And then we can present them to banks, to angel investors, to private equity investors. And this is where they can then get access to funding. So our whole pathway to finance includes financial education, financial advisory, financial connections, and then financial products, basically. So it's really a full pathway to growth.
Right. It's showing them. And I think, I mean, maybe you did say this, but I think one of the other things that you're doing in sum total is giving them almost the recipe as to how they can build further businesses. Or if people can't come to you guys, it's almost like, I went, like when you've done a course and you share all of the course that you've done with your best friend, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so good for you. And you know what, you need to do this, and you need to do that, and you need to do that. And your friend hasn't done the course, but they may as well have, because you've shared nearly everything. And I think that's the other part. It's the part of providing a kind of blueprint in many ways for them to be able to go, oh, this is what I did with Melanin Kapital. I know you might not be able to do all of this, but now that you're at this point in your business, maybe the mistake I made was I didn't do this and this and this at the beginning, which would have helped me. I didn't have any books and records. I didn't have an official bank account. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. These are the things that you can do, and you can do it at this price. Start as you mean to go on. And that's another way of empowering people, because giving them the knowledge just on the how is something that they can share with others.
It's very true. It's very true. And that would be the ultimate goal, definitely, that then every entrepreneur can be an ambassador and an inspiration for other entrepreneurs around them to also build their own solutions to the local problems, and then know for them what would be the pathway to be able to grow and create more impact and more possibilities for the communities around them. And definitely, like the way that we do it, so on the how we do it, we try to make sure that we include also resources that has already been built also, and that are available from other partners that also want to be in our platform, to really provide to those entrepreneurs a one-stop shop where they can pick up at any point in time the courses or the advice that are meant for them. So that's definitely how we want to achieve that. And yeah, we hope that ultimately this will help like a lot of entrepreneurs to create their own possibilities for themselves, create employment, so for their communities, and especially inspiration and role models for other African entrepreneurs in even the continent or external to the continent, even in the diaspora, because for a long time, like, it was not seen as possible to have a successful startup on the continent. Today, when you see that you have that many unicorns that are popping up every month or every 2 months, this is inspiring. You think that, yes, you can do it. And it's not just something that is reserved to the Silicon Valley or to Singapore. Like, in your country, you can take the risk and try and get support until the point that you make it. So that's I think also what's the impact would like ultimately to also create.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a part of it as well. Like, this is just my mind. For me, I think about it like this, that in doing all of this, you also hope to revolutionize the like continental Africa's VC and PE world, meaning it should no longer be the goal to meet the standards versus European criteria, but actually there becomes an African criteria that's like, this is what we knew, and we accept that it's different to the European criteria, but it doesn't mean that you can't aim for that solely, because there are enough investors who back their own and say, actually, we don't need to go and invest in something in the US for it to be a great product. We can actually invest here on our own terms, using the frameworks that we created that match our market, as opposed to having to change many things around to match European or American standards in order to get funding. And I think the fact that there are so many unicorns popping up at the moment, I'm like, are they unicorns, or has it been that African talent has been overlooked for all these years and innovation?
Yeah, no, of course, like there's two sides of it. I agree with you. I think the good thing is it's no longer, and it's what we want to see is that unicorns are no longer an exception. Like in the US, there are unicorns like at a high pace. You always have new unicorns popping up, and in Africa it's still slow, but it's coming up, and at least it's not anymore like a legend, but it's a reality. That's what we want to see. Yeah, like what we want basically is really, we think that there is maybe a missing link in the financial system, let's say on the African continent, that has excluded for too long a lot of entrepreneurs. So even beyond the VC and PE sector, like what we would like is really make finance work for the African continent, for Africans themselves. And there will still be the same ecosystem, but what is missing is really this kind of plug-in that could also include the rest of the populations. Because for now, financial services have been being on the banks and the capital, they've been, let's say, copied from other parts of the world, and it's working for one share and very small share of the market, but there's a whole part that is still excluded, and this is what we want to the gap that we want to bridge, basically, and more specifically when it comes to impact driven sectors, because there's also this huge considerations that are mostly overlooked, is that when climate change is going to happen in like Africa, climate change is already happening, but when it's going to worsen, African countries are going to be the ones that also will suffer the most. And in terms of what would be the consequences of this climate change and of COVID that we're experimenting today, like will really affect the future of young Africans. So it's our duty and our responsibility, us all, to really find solutions that can help the economies to become resilient, and to become resilient, they have to provide opportunities for the whole population and not just a share of the population. So that's what we also target in terms of in terms of possibilities to create for the communities. We want to target or today, those that we call small entrepreneurs, but who tomorrow could be the African multinationals that provide a lot of jobs, that provide critical services and goods that would be in line with the environment and with the needs of the population. So yeah, there's it's a bit of the longer term view of Melanin Capital. Like today, we really focus on, of course, make impact startups investable, connect them with impact funding, but this is because we have this kind of long-term vision moving forwards that we try to solve that problem in particular.
No, and that makes a lot of sense, because it means then that, you know, being a participant in, however you phrase it, like, you know, within your course or within your cohort, it's not then just once you've got the funding, you say goodbye, but it's also making sure that they live up to their, you know, they get their funding on the fact that they're impact driven, but it's also making sure and holding them accountable to say, well, you know, part and parcel of you becoming part of the Melanin Capital family means that you have to continue to live up to these goals over your 5, 10, 15, 20-year trajectory, because it's so closely aligned to climate change. It's so closely aligned to the future of, you know, loads of young Africans growing up. It determines so much that you cannot afford to renege on what you're doing. And this is why at this point we're backing you, because we see your potential, we see where you're going to go in the future, but we also want to make sure that what you're going to do in the future, or what you've promised, is actually what you're going to do. And I think that's a key point, because in a lot of cases, you know it as well as I do, people get investment because right now they're selling diversity or whatever else as part of their, you know, impact and whatever. But the reality is that as soon as they get the funding, they go and do something else, but they're not held accountable for it, because as long as it's profit generating, then that's fine. You know, you said you were going to deliver this much % on your return on the investment, we're happy. Whereas I like the fact that there's the accountability part with you. It's not just about building a business, getting the funding, and that being the end of it. It's following through on the impact to save future generations. And I like that a lot.
Thank you so much. And yeah, definitely that's one of the key issues. And that's also why, you know, like some entrepreneurs are missing on funding, is because of those lack of those bad experiences, let's say. So for us, that's why we have through the platform, we make sure that there's a verification, let's say, process and a vetting process, so that investors and banks and anyone that deal with us actually feel comfortable investing in those companies. But that's a real topic, like impact washing and you know, promises that are not delivered. It's of course something that is a big issue, and this is what we with technologies, what can be solved with time, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. Like I think we're seeing it everywhere, right? Greenwashing, impact washing, purpose washing, and I don't think it's going to change. I do believe though that when people do things inauthentically, it becomes very time consuming and expensive to keep up the momentum in something that you don't genuinely believe in. And that's why I think we'll see companies, people starting to fall by the wayside, because their motivations for doing what they were doing was just because it was trending, but not because they had a deeper anchor and interest in making that change. It just sounded good. And I think we'll start to see, like, as much as we've started to see so many people talking about lots of issues, I think we'll just as quickly see people going back to business as usual, because they're not getting the traction they expected, or whatever it is, the revenues that they expected, talking about these issues. And now it's going to be, okay, we're just going to go back to it because it's easier that way. And I think that's going to be one of the crucial differences we see going forward. Who's going to still stay around to try and make the world the better place, make the lives of future generations better, safer, healthier, you know, try to, what's the word I'm looking for? You can't reverse it, but you can, Oh, the word's gone out of my mind. It's not reverse it, but anyway, counteract it. That's it. Counteract the negative effects. And I think that's going to be an interesting process to see.
Yes, definitely. And I think, like, as you said, for those, for me, I'm not that scared about impact washing because, as you said, it takes a lot of time and energy. And if you don't do it well, you just won't get the result. And also, like, impact has now more and more funding, like a lot of governments, a lot of even corporates, and there's a huge demand even from the consumers to see more responsibility towards environmental and social impact. So there is money there, but when there is money, there's also great responsibility. So there is a lot of monitoring, techniques and demands that are required by the NGOs, governments, and even corporates now. So you can't just say that, yes, you will decrease CO2 by X%. You will have to actually provide on a quarterly report, like what is the CO2 that you've been saving this quarter. So, and there's more and more technologies now that are being developed to be able to quantify those impacts real time. So this is something that we also try to see at Melanin Kapital and see if we can even implement those technologies with our entrepreneurs, because at the end of the day, they are entrepreneurs that are really making a tremendous impact. I'm thinking about one that we had this year, Zafri from Ethiopia, who recycles agricultural waste to make paper. They definitely decrease CO2 emissions. They definitely make sure that the paper industry use less trees, and then they're saving trees even themselves. So the environmental impact is quantifiable, and it can be rewarded even, like through CO2 certifications, etc. Right. So there are and there will be more and more ways to control those things, to reward those that are making great impact and to penalize those that are not. So on this, I'm really, really not scared. I think it's more difficult when it comes to social considerations or gender equality, racial equity type of considerations. But yeah, there the reputational risk is quite high still. Like it's, I think, like more and more corporates and entrepreneurs like realize how important those topics are, not only for their consumers but also from their own investors. So I hope that this is going to get into the right directions very soon. But this is why your work is so important, that this is why we have Lians to actually make sure that this happens.
Right, because we have to, right? And we have to get past this thing of we're doing enough and we're doing this program and this whatever. It has to be something deeper, bigger, wider than all of that. But you know what, this is kind of why I like having all of these conversations, because essentially, even though our paths might not be the same, we're not walking on the same path, but our paths are aligned. And that's how everybody comes together to make an impact in their own different ways. But the point is we're all pulling together, because just as much as environmental and climate change is related to social injustices, we know, just thinking about what you said, if we ignore climate change, think about what's going to happen, not just on the continent of Africa, globally, and think about the people who are affected. Look who's been the most affected during the pandemic. It goes on. And I think that's conversations like these are important to raise awareness, but also to get people triggered into saying we cannot stay as we are, because as we are isn't working.
I totally agree.
So where can everybody find you? Handles, please.
Yes, absolutely. So very active on social media. We're especially on LinkedIn at Melanin Kapital, also on Instagram at melanin.capital, and of course Twitter. But if you need if you want to come into our platform and you want to go through this pathway of finance, then we can soon sign up on Tuesday. Actually, next Tuesday you can sign up already from our website www.melanincapital.com.
Very, very well. I like that. Very good. Very well done. And I think most people know where to find me on Instagram at Leanne MM. I don't really use Twitter really, but it's at Leanne Meyer 5, I think. And then Benefactum Consulting everywhere. That's just where we are. So thank you, Melanie. It has been amazing. And I'm finally glad we made it after 3 months.
Me too. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you so much for the invitation, and really looking forward to reconnecting soon.
Indeed. So we're going to say bye to everybody. And Kevin says, look it